You know, with comic book flicks being as popular as they are, it's easy to see why a movie like this would be so significant. After all, it features two of the world's most iconic superheroes together on the big screen for the first time. It was hard not to be at least somewhat curious when this film rolled around promising a royal rumble between two pop culture titans. And therein lied my most serious mistake. I was optimistic. Cautiously optimistic, sure, but optimistic all the same. After the crushing disappointment of Man of Steel, I swore that I wouldn't get excited for the sequel. Sure enough, though, I was suckered in for a second time. Upon leaving the theater, I just felt dejected, shocked at the sheer amount of potential thrown to the wayside.
Don't you think you're being a little overdramatic there?
Oh no, not you again. What do you want?
I just think you're being a bit too hard on this movie. At least it's better than the first one.
Yeah, but that's not saying very much. It's still an overlong, self-important mess of a movie, and that's if it can even be considered complete.
While I would agree that it is cluttered, for what they put in here, the good elements are very, very good, while the bad moments do really stick out.
Alright, before we go any further, we should probably catch people up on what we actually saw. This is Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. The film takes place about 2 years after Man of Steel. The world is divided on Superman. Some people see him as a godlike savior, while others see him as a threat to humanity. On the latter side is Bruce Wayne / Batman, a vigilante who believes that this alien should be destroyed before he wipes out the entire human race. Unbeknownst to both of them, though, they're being manipulated by the eccentric billionaire Lex Luthor, who also wants to kill Superman. Don't ask me why. Can the Dark Knight and the Man of Steel put aside their differences and come together as a team? Or will their conflict escalate to disastrous proportions? Find out next time. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Okay, now that was a little bit indulgent.
Not compared to the movie, and certainly not compared to Zack Snyder and his penchant for blowing stuff up. No beating around the bush, I'm just gonna get right into it. To call this level of destruction excessive would be an understatement. This man seems to have made it his mission in life to out-bay Michael Bay. In addition, the guy is basically the living embodiment of style over substance. He's so preoccupied with making his shots look cool that he doesn't seem to care about anything else beneath the surface.
Wow, that's harsh.
Oh, I'm not done. People might be inclined to defend Snyder because of how stylized and pretty his flicks are. Well, you know what? Plenty of other directors out there can make pretty movies with actual substance, which is a foreign concept to Snyder. In an effort to make this flick seem deeper than it really is, he desaturates every shot, causing the world to look dark, dismal, and depressing. This makes for a downright unpleasant viewing experience, especially during the aforementioned destruction scenes. Seriously, these so-called heroes flatten so many buildings that they would make Godzilla blush.
While I admit that there's way too much collateral damage, as if mocking everything the climax of the Avengers films focus on, I'm actually surprised how little action there is. It's mostly just a bunch of self-important dialogue amidst a slew of disjointed scenes. You can definitely tell that there was a lot of footage cut from this thing. The first hour or so just randomly jumps from scene to scene with little to no context or transitions.
Wait, I thought you liked this movie. Why are you ragging on it all of a sudden?
While I do think that the film is far superior to Man of Steel, I'm willing to acknowledge its glaring problems, which lie still in its storytelling and surprising lack of realism.
So once again, the biggest issue is the script.
Well, yeah. Would you like to do the honors? I know you have strong feelings towards the thing.
As a matter of fact, I would, although I take no pleasure in doing so. This screenplay is horrible, and just like the last time, we have David S. Goyer to thank for it. Chris Terrio of Argo fame is also credited, but Goyer's greasy fingerprints are all over the finished product. The dialogue is every bit as boring and exposition-heavy as Man of Steel. None of the characters talk like human beings. They simply spout lines in order to further the plot and hammer in the pretentious themes that the filmmakers desperately want to get across. Boy, do these characters love to drone on about their own reasons for existence and the symbolic significance of every little exchange. It's like the movie wants to have the thematic depth of the Dark Knight trilogy, but the writers don't seem to have any understanding of what made those movies great in the first place. So what we're left with is a bunch of pseudo-intellectual tripe that comes across less like the thinking man's comic book movie and more like the dumbest kid in class trying to sound smarticle.
At the very least, I can appreciate what this movie is trying to do. It's trying to portray the differing ideologies of the two title characters, obviously. The problem is that the film gets their ideologies wrong. Superman criticizes Batman for going above the law when he's constantly doing that himself. On the other hand, Batman is angry at Superman for causing a bunch of collateral damage, but he's perfectly fine with mowing people down on a nightly basis. Both of them are hypocrites, and this is never brought up.
That's really one of this film's fundamental issues. It doesn't understand these characters. They don't feel like heroes, they feel like brutes, guys who punch first and ask questions later. However, this is more than can be said for the supporting players, who barely have any character traits at all. Most of these guys are saddled with so much pseudo-intellectual drivel that their personalities are completely eclipsed, and the acting really suffers for it. Again, just like the last time, Snyder wrangles a phenomenal cast and gives them nothing to work with. Henry Cavill remains thoroughly lifeless as Superman, coming across less like a superhero and more like a robot. He's not interesting or inspiring, he's just boring. I hate this version of the Man of Steel.
Well, what do you expect? Superman's a boring character.
Oh, he is not. Don't give me that. You know, he can be pretty intriguing if you look past the superficial.
My problem with Superman is that most of the stories that I've seen with him revolve around the character only being overpowered.
Which is why a lot of the best Superman stories are about the morality behind the character. He's the hero that all other heroes aspire to be.
That's great and all, but I just wish that there was more than that to focus on. Take a character like Batman. You could have him struggle with his secret identity, you could deal with him staying on the right path of morality, you could show him trying to keep up with his superpowered allies. With Superman, you just don't have that kind of variety.
Okay, we're talking about an alien refugee who is constantly trying to protect the Earth from extraterrestrial threats, live up to everyone's lofty expectations, and stand as a shining moral example to all humanity.
I failed you, I failed myself, and all humanity. I hear everything. You wrote that the world doesn't need a savior. But every day I hear people crying for one.
Protect the people. It's why I'm here.
He saves people because he values their lives and sees the best in the human race.
Why are you here? There must be a reason for you to be here.
Yes, I'm here to fight for truth and justice in the American way.
I heard a child say that he wanted to be in the elite when he grows up because it would be fun to kill bad guys. Fun to kill. People have to know that there's another way. They have to see that someone believes in humanity strongly enough
To die for them?
I spent my life fighting for the little guy, fighting for truth and justice. It isn't relevant anymore.
That's what some people say. But I've fought for the same things, even when they don't seem fashionable. It's a never-ending battle, but we can't quit.
He does all of this while simultaneously attempting to fit in and maintain his own personal relationships. You can easily make a compelling story out of that if you actually cared about the material. Snyder and Goyer don't care about Superman. What's more is that they seem to despise everything having to do with him. They prove that with how they treat both him and his supporting cast. It's downright painful seeing actors this talented being forced to work with characters this shallow. Amy Adams is once again saddled with the useless doormat version of Lois Lane. Lawrence Fishburne spends most of his time yelling as Perry White. Diane Lane is utterly wasted as Martha Kent. And pivotal pal Jimmy Olsen has no character whatsoever because he gets shot in the head within moments of walking on screen. Worst of all, though, is Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor.
Come on, he wasn't that bad. I think you're exaggerating his awfulness just a little bit.
Oh, really? This is Lex Luthor.
You were great in your day, Superman. But it just stands to reason. When it came time to cash in your chips, this old, diseased maniac would be your banker. Mind over muscle?
This is Lex Luthor.
I own Metropolis. My technology built it, my will keeps it going, and nearly 2/3 of its people work for me whether they know it or not. Even you have to admit it's a model of efficiency. And yet, I've often thought, why limit myself to just one city? A being with your abilities could be very useful to me on a, shall we say, global scale.
This is not Lex Luthor.
The red capes are coming. The red capes are coming.
Correction. It's not the traditional Lex Luthor, but rather a different interpretation that maintains the intelligence and amps up the crazy. What's wrong with that? It's called trying something new. Not to mention it sort of harkens back to the mad scientist iteration from the early days.
Listen, I don't mind seeing a new version of a character. If the filmmakers deem it necessary to make changes to better suit the story, then I'm perfectly fine with that, as long as the end result doesn't completely suck. This Lex Luthor hurts my soul. Not only is his motivation muddied beyond belief, to the point where I have absolutely no idea what he wants or why he wants it, but Eisenberg's performance is so obnoxiously over the top that he single-handedly ruins every scene he's in. The way he minces around like a twitchy little weirdo is just embarrassing. He devours so much scenery that he makes Jim Carrey's Riddler look dignified.
Agree to disagree. I liked his eccentricities. They provided a nice break from the dullness of the other characters, at least most of them. Although, I think we were both impressed with one in particular. #Ben, it's not your fault!
No, it's really not. When I heard that Ben Affleck was cast as Batman, my first reaction was something along the lines of,
Whatever.
yeah, I wasn't jumping on the bandwagon of preconceived hatred. He's got the looks, he's got the talent. Honestly, I was more concerned by the fact that the creative team that ruined Superman would now be bringing us a new Batman just a few years after Christopher Nolan's triumphant send-off. However, despite the character being written horribly, coming off more as a trigger-happy brute than the world's greatest detective, Affleck is easily the best part of this movie. You can really feel the anger and sense of desperation that inform this version of the character. His performance comes across as very unhinged, making him the most brutal Batman that we've seen.
Breathe it in. That's fear. You're not brave. Men are brave.
He brings so much passion to the role that I genuinely want to see his upcoming solo flick.
Given that they were clearly going for the Dark Knight Returns iteration, it wasn't bad as a first attempt to put it on the big screen. But because the film has to focus on the incredibly important Lois Lane storyline with the Bullet, they couldn't go into much more detail other than brief glimpses of his tortured past. However, for what we got, I'm extremely interested in the Batfleck solo outing. And that is saying something, considering Batman is probably the most overused character in the oversaturated superhero genre.
What's more is that he's complemented by Jeremy Irons as Alfred, who should have been in the movie more, as he provides some of the few moments of real humor. His dry wit and sarcastic quips offer fleeting degrees of levity in an otherwise numbingly serious affair.
Funnel fairy butterbar, funnel fairy butterbar, funnel fairy butterbar, funnel fairy. There's nothing wrong with the microphone.
In addition, his unique brand of natural intensity makes for some terrific chemistry between him and Affleck.
While he didn't exactly wow me, it didn't help that the script gave him a grand total of 3.5 lines in the whole film. As such, Alfred in this film failed to grab me despite the above-average performance.
Understandable, but he's effective when he's there, and to a lesser extent, the same goes for everyone's favorite Amazon.
Whoa, that is surprising. You were against her casting from the get-go.
Look, I am a big enough man to admit when I'm wrong.
Ha!
For instance, I thought that Jon Favreau's Jungle Book looked like an uninspired cash grab, but it turned out to be an extremely enjoyable adventure. Likewise, I was not at all comfortable with the most iconic female superhero of all time being played by a skinny model with only a handful of acting credits to her name. To my surprise, though, Gal Gadot lends an aura of exotic mystery and intriguing edge to her role as Wonder Woman. Unfortunately, like Irons, she's not given much to work with, so her character's personality is left very vague. However, her presence is ultimately one of the film's few bright spots, albeit mainly because she's the only female character who's not a complete tool.
So, what'd you think of the other heroes?
Oh boy. If you thought that Marvel was too subtle with their cross-promotional setups, just wait until you get a load of this.
Alright, so let me lay it on you. We're nearing the climax of the movie, and Bruce decodes the thing that he got at the party, whatever it was, and for some reason decides to send it to this woman who he barely knows. When the woman, who turns out to be Diana Prince, opens the thing on her computer, she finds the hidden cameos that were supposed to be seen throughout the credits.
It just reeks of laziness, and the same goes for the music, which shouldn't be the case when you have the combined talents of Hans Zimmer and Junkie XL. However, Zimmer actually came out and said that after working on superhero flicks for so long, he struggled to come up with a, quote, new language for this one. All I can say is that it shows. The tracks here are not the least bit memorable despite how loud they are. Can you recall a single one?
Not a one. Nada. Not a lick. I could go on, but I won't. This video is already long-winded enough as it is. I will say that in my own personal conclusion, I found the film to be overall enjoyable. The villain, though annoying to some, was entertaining enough to offset the remiss performances of half of our heroes. From a pure popcorn standpoint, it kept me about as entertained as the 1998 Godzilla film, which sucked the big one in its own right. While it's not a good film, I found that I didn't regret paying the $7.50 for my ticket. Though I'm, guessing you feel a bit differently?
At the end of the day, Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice is an overblown, overproduced, and thoroughly disappointing experience that completely squanders its nearly limitless potential. Affleck and Irons give it their all, but their efforts are ultimately buried under a slew of lesser performances, criminally overstylized direction, a miserably dour tone, a script that's not nearly as smart as it thinks it is, and a fundamental misunderstanding of not just these characters, but of heroes in general. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to watch the far superior 90s version of this story. Thanks for watching. Thank you once again for joining in.
Yeah, I can tell by your tone that you really appreciate it.
Feel free to like, subscribe, and or comment. Until next time.